Welcome to the WTR Small Cap Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Tim Gerdeman, Vice Chair and Co-founder and Chief Marketing Officer of Water Tower Research. In today's podcast episode, I'm being joined by John Passalacqua, Chief Executive Officer of First Phosphate, OTC, ticker symbol FRSPF. First Phosphate is building a high-purity phosphate resource in Canada to provide a secure and scalable supply of phosphate and cathode active materials to the growing non-Chinese LFP battery industry. Also joining is my WTR equity research colleague, Dmitry Silversteyn. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Good morning, Tim. Good to be here. Thank you.
John, to kick things off, I know there was some big news. Denmark's Export Credit Agency is going to supply a potential of 170 million euro guarantee. With European and U.S. institutions now stepping up, how significant is this moment for First Phosphate?
Yeah, thank you, Tim. It's very important because now it allows us to source on both sides of the pond. We have the ability to source from Europe as well as from the United States, and that gives us, a good price advantage and allows us to set good competitive tension with suppliers. It's also important because it shows that a European institution is also interested in the First Phosphate project. So it kind of links North America and Europe into the importance of phosphate for LFP battery.
Thank you, John. Great to have you join us here today. Just to follow up on what Tim was saying, you've now got support of both the Exim Bank in the U.S. As well as the EIFO Bank or organization in Denmark on the European side. How important is it to have both continents effectively backing this project, particularly in terms of procurement flexibility and navigating today's trade and tariff environments? How important is that for First Phosphate?
Yeah, it's very important because what it does now is it allows us, to have exposure also to European banks or global banks that work on, both sides of the pond. It shows, above all, also the need for this type of high purity igneous phosphate. It's a global concern. It's a Western concern. It's not just, isolated to one country, but it's about an entire LFP battery supply chain that needs to be reestablished in the Western world. And if you remember well, right, we've been able to produce the first LFP batteries made out of fully North American critical minerals. And this is really critical for the West to, onshore this supply chain. So this is what this shows. It shows that, everyone's on board to make this happen together with First Phosphate.
Understood, John. Thank you. With the total mine build out expected to be under $500 million, if I remember correctly, how did these two facilities, which potentially, totaling over 300 million, change the way investors should think about the overall financing challenge which every development company faces?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, first of all, we've got a reasonable project. Anything that's under 500 million is considered extremely reasonable nowadays with most CapExes, into the billions. So we kept it that way on purpose. We kept a small to medium sized mine close to infrastructure. So there isn't really, any big risks other than, building out the concentrator and building out the infrastructure just around the mine. The rest of the infrastructure in the communities is all there. So this is really a big de-risk moment. When you look at, together with these two entities, more than 50% of the capex is already spoken for. That's extremely positive, right? And it helps to bring other lenders to the table. So it de-risks a lot. I mean, you have a First Phosphate stock trading at less than 10% of the net present value of its PEA. Now we've completed our drilling, been able to move the resources up from inferred and indicated to indicated and measured. That's what we're working on right now when we get into a feasibility study. And now, it gives all that much more credibility to the feasibility study, knowing that there's already lenders on the other side willing to back it. So it just starts to, really put the capital stack together and really show that there's a real path towards progress and there's a path towards a mine, which we hope to establish here by 2029.
Great news there. So, John, you're seeing this level of interest from both U.S. and European government-backed institutions, even before the feasibility study is ready, as you just mentioned. What does that say about the underlying demand for your project in the broader LFP supply chain, especially when we're talking about non-Chinese sources?
Yeah, it just says, the governments really want it and they want it now, and they really like what First Phosphate's doing, where we can get from mine to market, all the way from, the dirt in the ground, as they say at Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean, to an LFP battery. It just shows that, we are solving the solution that governments are looking to solve. And of course, when the governments see that, they come to the table to be able to solve their problems as well through the company. So First Phosphate extremely well positioned here as the North American and international Western supply chain for LFP batteries.
Great, and then obviously well understood and very timely. Now, maybe next to the last question, I guess. How does the EIFO involvement in particular reflect the growing European interest in your project and support for your existing and potential additional European offtake partners?
Yeah, so as you know, we already have a European off-taker, and we have a prepayment on that off-take as well. So this is really, given the security to IFO to come in and back as well. And as you know, we also got the recent contribution by the federal government of Canada of 17 million non-dilutive, non-reimbursable funding. So all of this really just, shows that the governments are coming together and really willing to back the project.
Understood. Now, being a capitalist that I am, I'm not always in favor of government interference or involvement in industries. But given that, the critical metals industry and the battery industry is really competing against the Chinese government rather than any individual firm, government involvement at this level in European and Western economies is probably necessary and required to be able to catch up and free ourselves from the choke point that is the supply coming through China. As you continue advancing towards feasibility and definitive financing, how should investors think about the path from these letters of intent that we just discussed from the US and European agencies to fully committed capital? What are the key milestones along the way that investors should look for?
Yeah, so our next key milestones is we have to get out our drilling results. We have to set our 3D model, set the model for the resource, and then move into the feasibility study, complete the feasibility study by end of 2026 is what we've signaled to the market. Then it comes into permitting, which includes environmentals, etc. And we're hoping to have that complete in 2027, and we're hoping to move to an open pit mine in place by 2029. Now, those are extremely aggressive timelines. I just want to caution on that, but you have to start high. So and it's also important to have really strong timelines in place for the governments, for the financiers, and as you can see, that does get a lot of interest. The financiers, the governments are looking for a critical path towards production, and that's what we've put together here.
Understood. Thank you, John.
Thank you so much, Dmitry. Tim, great to see you guys.
Thanks, John, for joining us, and Dmitry for the thoughtful questions, and have a great day, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, as well as visiting www.watertowerresearch.com to stay up to speed on the company's small cap written research reports, podcasts, fireside chats, industry-specific symposiums, and conference schedules. We will see you next time for another edition of the WTR Small Cap Spotlight podcast. Finally, a special thanks to the producer and editor of the podcast, Krista Fitzpatrick.